prefer the word pure.
And then they end up paying a duty to get their own works back into the country.
Laced with this erotic flavor, and nobody talks about it.
This is rare, actually, that I do a dialogue with somebody like you and we kind of openly discuss gay things.
I'm sitting here in Delhi, and it just rained a little while back.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll just do it. Okay. Hello, this is Evil O, Oaswo X Waswo, coming to you again from Udaipur. And today, on this monsoonish day, we're very lucky to be sitting with none other than Georgina Maddox. And Georgina is a curator, probably best known as a writer and a critic also. And I think it's the first time, Georgina, that I've actually have interviewed a critic. So hello, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Better, as you know, I've been through some pretty hair-raising stuff with the accident. But
Right.
In the driver's seat now, better.
You were in a horrible accident up in Himachal Pradesh, correct?
No, not Himachal. It was on the Lucknow highway.
Okay, in Lucknow.
Yeah.
But you actually went off the road, right? And you were in the hospital with a lot of broken bones?
Yeah, my jaw broke, basically.
Well, everybody was very worried about you when that happened. And we're happy to see you back and up and...
Yes, happy and thankful to everyone who supported me. I must give out a vote of thanks. Thank you so much for all the help from the art world, from my classmates, from my friends, my family. It was really wonderful how everybody came up and just helped. I was most of the time unconscious, so I don't even know. But when I came around, it was wonderful to see friends and family around. It was great.
I know everybody was extremely worried about you. Did anybody die in that car crash? Somebody died too, didn't they, or no?
Yeah, the driver actually, he was sitting right next to me, and he got a head injury at the back. So he passed away on the spot.
Oh, how sad.
The people at the back, we didn't have seat belts. So that's why we got the maximum injury.
Yeah. So
always very simple.
You're in Delhi today. You're on the mend for sure. I know you've been sort of out and about a little bit in the scene again, and you're back to writing, which everybody's very happy about. So I guess the way I want to start this off maybe is to talk about being a critic, because it always seems to me that being a critic is a very, it's a job that has a lot of responsibility. So how do you approach being an art critic? You write for the...
Well, actually, was to be very honest with you, I mean, I think it's a very sort of not a well-defined role right now, because criticism in India is not what it can be. I think that a lot of what we do is art writing. We report a lot, and there is a small margin for criticality, but it's, what should I say, lacking in India. I think the criticism is not what it, people fear the critics in the West, and they look forward to the show being called good or bad. Here, it's not really like that. I think that sort of practice hasn't really evolved in our writing. We have critical points of the essay, or when we write, there are certain points where we get critical, but I think that we're not as critical as we could be.
It always seems to me like here in India, especially these days, it seems like everybody, either they get a good review or they get no review, because it seems like critics are really afraid to give a bad review or to be even critical in a minor...
They'd rather not say anything than to say something.
So why is that? Is that because of gallery pressure or newspaper pressure, or why is it that critics are a little shy about actually critiquing work in a more harsh manner?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of factors. One of the factors I would say is that we don't have uh, that mahal, what they call the atmosphere, where we are critical and we are we exchange um, critical notes. I think it's not taken well to begin with. The art world is quite small, so people are afraid of getting isolated and getting, I know that have been a couple of critics who've been vocal, and it's not been taken very well, to be honest with you. So we kind of couch the criticality and we kind of make it as palatable as possible. Nobody is really out and out horribly critical in their writing in India. So
Yeah,
that
I
is
used
one.
I used to get some fairly harsh reviews, but I don't seem to get those anymore either now. So I don't know if that means I've crossed a threshold or if it's simply that critics have become more shy about being outspoken. I don't know. So
That personally, I would say that you've grown a lot in your work. So maybe that is also one of the reasons.
do you know you were one of the first people who wrote about me? One of
Yeah.
the big time critics. That's when you were still living in Mumbai and you reviewed India poems. And I think it was Rajan Fulari who introduced us, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Rajan introduced us and you reviewed that show.
That
And
cafe
you were sort of positive, but I think you did offer a couple like sort of caveats also. So I thought you wrote a good review, because actually, when a review comes out and it's nothing but glowing praise, that's almost as bad as a bad review because it seems very superficial and it doesn't seem to have any sincerity to it. Yeah.
True. I mean, I avoid using all these superlative words and fantastic and over the top kind of words where you just go completely bonkers and say, oh, this is fantastic. Because I think there's always room for growth, and we can be, we definitely evaluate and praise work. We can also be critical in a nice, constructive way. I think criticism should be constructive. Just calling something good or bad doesn't help the audience or the artist or anybody for that matter.
When you read like the writings of Richard Bartholomew, I mean, now there was a critic because he did write negative reviews and glowing reviews, but he always went out of his way to explain why. I mean, he very much articulated why he was giving a bad review or a good review. It just didn't seem like he was just playing favoritism.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be, sometimes people get very personal. In some blogs, I won't take names, but there are certain bloggers and writers who get really personal. They attack the person, even though they're making a very good point. Sometimes it gets lost because they're in that personal mode of attacking.
Right.
And then people get confused that do they have an axe to grind? Is this an old, sort of rivalry playing out? Or is it really somebody being critical about a particular thing? So that gets confusing for the audience, that gets confusing for the art world. And I feel that much of sense being sort of, very, very subjective should be avoided.
Yeah, Johnny can do that sometimes. I'll name names. Johnny ML can do that sometimes. He seems to get rather personal sometimes. But, I tend to like what Johnny writes, even when I disagree with him. And even, you kind of can see through some of those personal attacks, but at least he speaks his mind.
At least he speaks his mind. That much we can totally value him for that. Because he's one of the few voices that has the courage to say that, oh, I don't agree with this and this is wrong, and
Right, exactly.
One of the few people, yes, definitely. But yeah, it gets a little personal sometimes.
Who are you all writing for now, Georgina?
A bunch of are MASH, there was Stir, there's Art Dose now, the Hindu, and I used to write for these magazines. I write for Art India also. Regularly, I give them my reviews. So, and I have my own personal blog also, the Maddox Project, which I have. Yeah, which I've not been writing on recently, but in the past I used to do some analytical pieces which I was not carried anywhere else, and it would be carried on my blog. So I'm happy about those pieces that I've written in the past. Yes.
Many years ago, you moved from Mumbai, because I met you in Mumbai, and I think you were writing for the New Indian Express or something in Mumbai, and then you shifted to Delhi. Um, can you say anything
Came in
about?
2009 actually.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Can you
2009.
say anything about the difference between the Mumbai art scene and the Delhi art scene? Anything you notice that's different about them?
Yeah,
Or
there's a huge difference actually in terms of Delhi has a lot of space. And at the time when I came to Delhi, in fact, the art fair had just launched. Art fair had launched in 2008, so I came to Delhi in 2009. And there was a lot of excitement around the art fair and the kind of, what should I say, institutional support that Delhi gets is a lot more than what Mumbai gets. Mumbai has a very good collection of private galleries, and there are lots of people like Jani Nicholson, who's no more, and the Kemold family, the Pandols. They have really been the pioneers of art in Bombay in that sense, and they have been known for their good taste and their support of the progressives and even the contemporaries as well. So I mean, in that sense, but Bombay has the problem of space because space is really expensive in Bombay, and all the galleries tend to be located in that Colaba area and nowhere in the suburbs. It becomes very difficult to have, beyond Bandra, it becomes very difficult to have galleries in the suburbs. Whereas in Delhi, it's much more spread out. You have South Delhi, then you have Gurgaon also. So, and then there's North Delhi, which has a scene, but not that much.
I re-
So
I
I,
re- I
so
remember when I had my last show at Sakshi in 2014, Geeta Mehra, she warned me. She said, "Waswell, don't expect too many people to come to your opening because not many people actually do anymore in Mumbai because of the travel distance too. Because all the galleries are in South Mumbai, and if they don't, if many of your artist friends say don't live in South Mumbai because the rents are too expensive, so they're living way up somewhere and they have to take the train down and all of that. So I think that's another strike against it.
yeah, so that is a problem with the commuting and living in the suburbs and then coming all the way to Colaba and South Mumbai is difficult. But otherwise, I think the Mumbai scene is good in that, in terms of its criticality, in terms of its, search for talent. A lot of good talent has come out of Mumbai. So definitely, and the market was doing very well at one point in 2004 to 2008. Those 4 years in Mumbai, I seen the market really soar, and all the prices that were achieved were, a lot of them were Mumbai artists like Taib Mehta, whether it was Taib Mehta, Tunduria, even Raza. They're all seen as artists who come from Mumbai. The push was there to grow the market from Bodhi and Kemold and all these galleries. And then Delhi caught up, and now Delhi is kind of leading the art scene in that sense because of A, its economics, B, it's got a lot of good space, and it does a lot of collaborative shows, which is good because you have people coming from Mumbai, you have people coming all the way from Kochi as well. The Kochi Biennale, of course, has been something which we've all been so happy with
Right.
in terms of its ability to bring the local talent and to move things away from the metropolitan cities and
I
bring things.
always I saw the same thing because prior to 2008, it seemed like the Indian art scene was really centered in Mumbai because you
Yeah,
had all the corporate houses and the businessmen, and they were all buying heavily as investment. And then after that crash in the art market and worldwide, it seemed, I mean, it's very unfortunate, and it made me really sad because it seemed like people just walked away from the art scene and thought, oh, bad investment, sort of. There was that attitude among many of the corporate collectors. But Delhi continued on because Delhi has the academics. It's got the academics, it's got the cultural attaches, it's got the ambassadors, all of that. And Delhi I think that's when Delhi just really took over the reins, you know.
Came into the role in that sense.
Right.
Mm.
So let's talk about, you've been very strongly connected with Engendered Gallery, if I'm correct, at least in the past.
Yeah, in the past we were working together, but now it's more like I am seeing them as more as a critic. Earlier I was hands-on. So Myra had come from New York, and she is a friend. So she kind of got in touch with me, and we sort of wanted to see what we can do together in Delhi. And she had all these really interesting ideas. Her approach is very multidisciplinary, and I hadn't seen that being done. So now it's being done a lot more, but it's something that she brought with her from New York, where she has a dance background, she has a performance background. So she brought a lot of performance elements into her exhibitions, which I found really exciting and stimulating. So, and she brought gender politics, she brought human rights issues, there was music. So it was very multidisciplinary, very varied, and not just about, viewing paintings, or even for that matter, looking at installations. A lot of it was about discussing and, collaborating, doing workshops. So I found that very exciting.
Yeah,
And we
I
worked
give Mina, her full name is Mina Mukherjee, right?
with
I
Mukherjee,
give
yes.
her a lot of credit for attempting to do that and doing it, you know, to create a space that was just for gender, sexual minorities, let's say. I mean, she really stuck her neck out to do that, I feel, you know, in
Nobody
India.
had done that,
Nobody
actually.
had done that, and to make the attempt, and then to organize exhibitions that were held at, I think, at the U.S. Cultural Center and other places, that had people like Balbert Christian in it, and all of this. She did a good job, I think.
She's still doing it, so that's great.
So where do you see, let's just talk about that. What do you see the state of sexual politics in India currently? You want to talk about that at all or no?
Currently, things are at a bit of a, should I say, in terms of 377 has been, read down, which is great. That was a very, very strong, very long battle that we faced. After the people from the NAS Foundation were arrested, and then because before that people were not talking about Section 377 or anything like that. We didn't even know, there was a legal sort of lobby against being queer. And being queer was socially not acceptable. People didn't talk about it. It was something which you didn't even have the word queer. You had words like gay and lesbian, and it was very sort of scattered. People were, hiding in the closet.
And you
So
had
we,
all sorts of like localized words that were derogatory as well,
yes,
of
but
course.
words like Koti and Hijra are still celebrated. I feel that, there are some, Hijra, for example, is a word which is very strong in India. The Hijra identity, in fact, is something which has been over the years celebrated. And it has been something which has a sacred, past behind it.
Right.
It's not like the gay identity, which is not like the lesbian identity, because gay and lesbian has been seen something as very sort of metrosexual, something which is a big city identity. But the Hijra identity is something which goes across India's entire map. If you start in the north and go all the way down south, Hijras have been,
We have a local Hijra scene here in Udaipur, and Radhasham, who's the best known of them all, who has posed for me in photographs. But Radhasham is very well known in Udaipur, dances at so many weddings, and always for like John Mashtami, she dances in front of Jagdish Temple. She gets a huge crowd. She gets on television. I mean, she's a local celebrity, and
so
everybody
is
loves her.
Lakshmi from Mumbai. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've met Lakshmi as well. Have
I've
you met
not met
Lakshmi?
her, but I've heard about her. Yeah.
She's a big celebrity from Mumbai, and then we have Abhina from Delhi. And I mean, I'm taking a few names, but there's a lot of. I think the Hijra presence in India is very strong, but unfortunately, the queer movement, the way it has grown, there are silos, and there are groups which find it difficult to communicate. They're not able to see eye to eye. And there's a rise of a right wing also within the queer movement. So even that has to be addressed and spoken to and spoken about. And then, so there are lots of politics. There are caste politics which are not talked about properly. There are women's issues which are not addressed because women have very different issues from queer men. So, in terms of, there are few things where you can meet. And 377 for a lot of people, it wasn't even talking about the lesbian existence because it was talking about, but certain sexual acts. So then it was through negotiation, dialogue, meeting with the groups that we were able to sort of bring in the agenda of the lesbian community, or bring in the agenda of the trans community, bring in the Hijra agenda, because it was very gay-centric to begin with.
It's very interesting that the transgender community actually became accepted first legally, right? The third sex got recognized by the Indian courts even before section, 377
was lifted,
right,
yes.
Right. That's because the Hijras were such a part of Indian culture to begin with. But, all of that's going to go on because I was active in gay rights in the US when I was younger. And, like always, it always kind of starts with the drag queens and the butch lesbians and all of that, the ones that can't hide, the ones that can't hide. So they have to fight for their rights, and then as it progresses, then you start getting formation of things like, I remember in Milwaukee, we had, forget its exact name, but it was basically the Gay and Lesbian Businessmen's Association and things like that, began to form. And then, of course, we had the log cabin Republicans that were conservative homosexuals who voted for the Republican Party. And of course, they always had a difficult time with the rest of the gay movement, but they were still at that time allowed to join in parades and things like that. But it diversifies, and so it diversifies on both the left, that kind of splinters into all subsections, and also diversifies on the right. But I was wrong about some things, I'll admit it, because in the US, because for us initially it was just repeal the sodomy law, because we had one in our home state of Wisconsin. Repeal the sodomy law, that was one thing. And then the next thing was get a gay rights law that basically said we had the right to employment, so we would not be fired for being openly gay. And that was so important. But when people started talking about gay marriage, I was actually against it at first. I was one of those. I said, this will never fly. You're going to set back everything we've worked for. You're going to set back everything because people are just going to hate this idea. They're going to push back. But I remember one person said to me, no, Waswo, they said, that's the one thing people can relate to, because when you talk about gay and lesbian, they think about sex and sex acts. And they said, marriage is one thing everybody can relate to. So if you couch it in the terms of loving relationships and why shouldn't they be able to get married, that's more easy to sell to like the conservative middle America. And they were right. I didn't believe it. I thought they were going down the wrong path totally, but it worked,
Yeah.
It totally worked. So
that is wonderful. I mean, in India, we're still confused about that because there are progressive movements that like to talk about partnership rights, because the word marriage is really, marriage is seen as patriarchal in the feminist movement, and a lot of the queers are feminist. So they find it difficult to sort of make peace with the idea of pushing that concept, which is patriarchal, and would like to redefine the idea of marriage, not against it, but sort of re-looking at how we can look at partnership rights and make it a lot more gender neutral in that sense. If you can make marriage gender neutral, which is a bit of a, I should say it's a dichotomy, but it would be something that would be wonderful if it can happen. And I think that the community is looking at how to sort of begin that dialogue, because now we've got basic rights. We're not criminals anymore, but we would like to. There are many couples who want to share their lives and who'd like to have partnership rights and not have been sometimes, there have been cases, and I've actually known people who faced where one of the partners was ill and was fighting with cancer. And when she passed away, her wife didn't have any rights over her property or her will. And the family just came and took all the money and, and took all the land and just fought with her and completely, isolated this person. And that is horrible, that something like
That's
that
a
is.
huge problem. Many people don't realize that gay people have, that we have partners for years and years, like Tommy and I now for 30 years or something. And it's like, yeah, one of us can die and some shirt tail relative can swoop in and say, oh, no, he was my relative,
They
who's
would have
this,
done anything in the whole time.
you know. But you know what
That
Tommy
is,
and I did to protect ourselves in the US, even before gay marriage was legalized, we just made a whole bunch of contracts with our attorney between each other, basically making sure that everything was written as to where the money would go. So, because
yes,
you
that is
can do
one.
things, but that's what the gay community should do, I feel, in ways until marriage comes about or some sort of partnership agreement.
Yeah.
People need educational seminars or something about how best to protect themselves against those scenarios.
Yes, that is true. They need seminars. They need a lot of access to legality, because very often we don't even have. There are some couples who don't even have the money to have a lawyer. Forget about making contracts and all of that. I mean, they just run away together. They sort of manage to eke out an existence. Somebody's working and they're in the closet. They can't even, go out as a couple. One of the partners, it's usually the femmes who get really good jobs because they pass as straight. And they are the ones who are earning the money for the family. And the butch partner has to stay at home and be quiet and be invisible and, no, not having rights and not
Right.
having, money, which is very difficult. And then how do you sort of figure out the partnership rights? There are a lot of problems. I mean, we can have a whole different seminar on this, I feel.
Really?
It's a very detailed topic. I'm going to switch on the light.
Yeah, I was just
Just
going
a
to
second.
suggest you're getting a little dark in the monitor.
Is this better?
Better. Yeah. 10 times better. Oh, we should have had that on from the beginning.
Sorry.
It was getting dark as the sun was going down or something.
Yeah, going down. I
Sort
like
of
the
started
natural
out
light.
good,
So.
and then I'll try to brighten it up in editing. Might take a while, but I'll do it. But yeah, protecting ourselves is so important. But I guess, advice I would have too. I mean, it took us decades to get as far as we did in the US. Because when was Stonewall? 1968, I think it was. And that's when I came out to my parents, was 1968. But I mean, it took until what? The early 2000s, mid 2000s, when we finally got gay marriage enacted, I think under the Obama administration, I believe, through a Supreme Court decision. So, I mean, it took a long time. And I always caution because, like, if you push too hard, then people will push back.
You have to. It's a very interesting kind of a push and pull factors that keep going back and forth. But looking at art now that we've been talking about the queer rights movement, if you look at art, I would say people like Bhupen, kind of flouted all laws and was just there. He was fabulous in that sense. His work, came from the middle class. He was talking about issues like, living a middle class life, having homoerotic experiences at tailor shops, at religious ceremonies, when you're sitting in the satsang or together, just and the kind of homoerotic relationships that exist within Indian fabric, without bringing in a kind of a sort of what should I say, academic, or even for that matter, activist dialogue, which is essentially coming from the West, to be honest with you. The kind of rights that we see now in the rights movement and the kind of, dialogue that happens over that is very different from what Bhupen talked about. in a sense that his was like a lived reality, and a kind of, he would talk about things where, people were just sort of there, and they just loved each other, and there was no questioning or no sort of, you know, mm, to the point where there were men who were married and they had a wife and a family and they had their lover also. And people get very worked up about this. But it's a lived reality, for many gay men and for, I guess, some lesbians. But, it's something about the Indian fabric which is very unique and needs to be talked about and celebrated. And I think Bhupen did that in his art. And it's only now that we are celebrating him after he passed away. But when he was alive, I had the great opportunity to meet him when I was in Baroda studying there. And it was so wonderful to just, hang out with him in the gallery and see his work and, chat. And he was so approachable. That's what I loved about him. He was so matter of fact, so down to earth.
Yeah, I never met him. He seemed like such a sweet person, though, He died in what, 1993, I think? No, not 2003.
No.
2003.
2000.
Yeah, I think. And I was in India at the time he died, I believe. Can you Google it?
I'm going to Google.
Google.
Sorry. We can keep talking until that time. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, his art was just wonderful to me on a purely visual basis. I loved it. But the fact that he was openly gay obviously gave it another attractiveness to me. And I like the way he approached it because it's sort of the way I've always tried to do it too. It's not like he's making his homosexuality a huge issue. It's more like, well, this is just me, and this is part of me. And that's
exactly.
kind of the way I like to be. I mean, this is rare, actually, that I do a dialogue with somebody like you and we kind of openly discuss gay things, because normally I approach it with, well, it just slips out in conversation. I say, well, I'm going to go visit my partner, Tommy, in Bangkok. And if people don't know, they find out, but.
Yeah, but I also did mention in my piece that there is a strong homoerotic subtext in your work. And it's like kind of a little joke, and people who know can get it, but people who don't know will not get it, obviously. But I like that about the work. I like the fact that it's not thumping its chest and saying, hey, look, I'm queer. But it's there as a little joke and a little subtext, and you can see the quality, and I really enjoy that.
Well, in some of the works, it becomes quite obviously homoerotic. Yeah. Other times, it's more subtle. But I've never been wanted to be pegged as a gay artist in the sense of a gay artist who, and a lot of male gay artists are like this. They basically do homoerotic art, and to me, it's like, I don't want to be pegged as that because my art is more than that. It's my art. It's not about sexuality; it's about life. So. Yeah.
Very limited. Then there's another artist who I've talked about in my essay that I have written for this book called The Phobic and the Erotic. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a good book. You should pick it up at some point. I'll send you the essay.
The book called?
The Phobic and the Erotic.
The Phobic and the Erotic.
Yeah, edited by Vrinda Bose and Shuddharatha. And it is basically a collection of essays. And I had written about Bhupen and Amrita Shergill. And it was a very early writing on Amrita Shergill. At that time, a lot of the scholarship on her had not acknowledged the homoerotic, the lesbotic subtext in her work, which was a lot of her self-portraits and a lot of her, intimate scenes between women together in the nude or just, talking to each other with a sort of laced with this erotic flavor. And nobody talks about it. Like, you have Mulk Rajaran talking about she's such a great artist. There's a point where Geeta Kapoor also even, didn't directly address it. But then later on she does, because Vivan brought out his book, a beautiful 3 volumes, 2 volumes or 3 volumes, I'm not sure. I think it's 2 volumes. And that sort of has the letters where she talks about Marie-Louise Chanassi, who was her lover when she was in Paris.
Oh,
who was a woman. Yes. And very few people know this about Amrita Shergill. And they tend to not like to acknowledge it because they want her to be the first woman painter, and they talk about her, being a feminist, yes, but they'd rather talk about her male lovers and her liaison, so as with Nehru. But people love to talk about that, but they don't acknowledge the fact that she was also very, very erotic towards her gaze in the way she looked at the feminine body, and the way she's done the nudes are so beautiful. And because there is a genuine sort of appetite there where she sort of approaches the female form. And I've talked about that in my essay, and I got a bit of flack also for it.
Hello, this is Evil O again. We had to have a little scene change, as you will notice when you see Georgina, because our connection went bad from her home. And so now she's where are you at, Georgina?
I'm at Latitude 28, the gallery where I have worked, because I used to work with Bhavna on Take or Art when we were digitizing the magazine. And it's wonderful to see how she's, stuck out her neck and opened her gallery despite the COVID times, and how you've had an exhibition, which is wonderful. It was lovely to see the physical works, because I saw the show online when I wrote my review for MASH. And I'm really enjoying seeing the physical works, and it's wonderful to come here, even though Bhavna's missing in action. But
Well, it's okay. It's kind of fun, actually. I felt bad that we had technical difficulties at your house, but at least we got you into the gallery now. And the gallery's only like 15 minutes from your house, right? It's close.
on a good day, it's 15 minutes, but it took me half an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, we left off talking about Amrita Shergill and her sort of secret lesbian affair in Paris, and how that was not always brought up. And you were happy that it was brought up by certain critics. I think you said Geeta Kapoor.
Well,
And I was just going to.
said Vivan Sundaram. Actually, no correction there. I said Vivan Sundaram because he was the one he and his sister were doing research on a film that they were planning on Amrita. And the film couldn't take off, so they came up with this beautiful collection of books in which and Vivan and Geeta together have documented her, for not just her photographs, but her letters. Her entire life has been put out there so intimately that I was really moved and surprised, because very often family wants to keep certain things secret, you know. But
Right.
but Amrita was really what should I say? She was a boheme. She was somebody who was revolutionary in her views on feminism, on sexuality, on gender, on art. So she was somebody who lived life large. And I think that got played down by the family, because they were a little worried about, this shouldn't come out into the light, or that shouldn't come out into the light. And the interesting thing is that one of Amrita's nephews, Aman Shergill, was my classmate in Baroda. And he and me used to discuss a lot about Amrita. And I got so interested in her, I started my research on her while I was in Baroda itself. And I saw this old book by Mulk Raj Anand, where he talks a little bit about her autoeroticism, where she's autoerotic about her own body. And it kind of it's underlayered and very, like I said earlier, we used to hint at things, because it was really hard to talk about homoeroticism or lesbian identity, or homosexuality or gay identity or Koti, Hijra. There are so many intersex. I hope I'm not offending any of the community by leaving them out, but we have an endless alphabetical soup, which is growing every day. And Amrita was really ahead of her time in that sense. So people found it very difficult to talk about her, approach to life. And I think Vivan and Geeta have been so brave in bringing out those books.
Did Amrita actually verbalize her lesbianism to some extent?
She wrote to her mother.
Okay, she wrote to her mother about it.
Talked about it to her mother.
Okay.
You don't tell dad about these things, you always tell mom. So she told her mother that Marie-Louise Shaughnessy, she's really interesting, she excites me, but she also frightens me. something like that. I think I'm paraphrasing the letter, but she was, Amrita was, well, if I were to use a word, I would say she's bisexual because she liked men as well. And she had a lot of
Right.
words.
I think there's a lot of bisexuals in society who many times they skew like maybe 80% straight, 90% straight, but then they have that little 10, 20% that kind of goes the other way. And
Right.
those people often I feel those are the people that often become debates in the history books because people in the gay community will claim that they were gay many times, and then like straight writers will say there's no evidence of them being homosexual and blah blah blah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
certain gay members of the community know better. But then it's like, well, were they really gay or were they just kind of playing both sides? I mean, sometimes it's a definitional thing too, you know but
But, but in today's day and age, I would say homosexuality is so fluid and gender is so fluid. And putting people into boxes is such a limiting sort of existence for anybody. And the fact that your gender is fluid, the fact that your sexuality is fluid, the fact that your religion is fluid. I mean, I'm born Christian, but tomorrow I'm going to the Jagannath Mandir to give thanks to Lord Jagannath because I have managed to survive my operation, my second operation. So I think that, and all this Hindutva and this fighting, I think it's so unnecessary. It's just trying to put people in boxes constantly and trying to claim superiority of one thing over the other. Whereas you're a spectrum, you can touch so much in your life.
well, do you subscribe to the non-binary philosophy that there's non-binary people?
I definitely do.
Oh,
Yeah.
you definitely do. See, that's all new to me because I go back to the days when the gay groups, when we got together, it always broke down basically gay, lesbian, transvestite, transgender, and that was it.
Yeah.
And like nobody ever said they were non-binary. That wasn't part of the lexicon. So I have a hard time adjusting to that, maybe because of my age sometimes.
Well, I initially had, questions about it, and I also had personal experiences, which made it very hard for me to accept. I was biphobic for some time, to be honest with you, because women would just dump me for men, and that really hurt,
Of
because
course.
you put your whole life out there, and you love them with your heart, and then they just say, "Oh, look, I'm going to go get married and have some children. Bye bye," and you're like, "What the f?" So that did make me feel, I questioned bisexuality, and I was like, oh, it's very convenient. But with time, I realized that there were very few options at that time, and what were women going to do if their parents told them that, we've brought you up and we've taken care of you, and here you are, abandoning us and not giving us grandchildren. I never got that kind of lexicon from my dad because he was very progressive himself, and I was lucky, that I didn't have to deal with that kind of, heteronormative oppression. Because
I
my
was
dad,
lucky too because my mother was actually quite conservative. She was very, very Christian, and she came from a rural farming community. Her father was actually a farmer in northern Wisconsin, but on my father's side was a much more urbane, citified kind of family, and so my father's side of the family was a little bit more sophisticated. And then my mother also, she had become a beautician. She was a beautician much of her life. She styled hair. And, of course, gay men, there's a lot of gay men working as hairstylists. So my mother very quickly became aware of the gay scene to some extent. And so by the time I came out to them in 1968, um, they didn't totally freak out. I was very lucky that way, but they had the attitude like, "Oh, this is a phase, give it a couple years. We'll talk to you in 2 years. See if you've changed." That was the attitude. But I
yeah,
was lucky, they weren't the type who would disown me. They loved me too much, you know. So
I'm sure the people who pressure their children into marriage also love their kids, but sometimes conservatism just overtakes societal pressure, and they exist on a certain level, and it's difficult for them to explain to the relatives. Sometimes my relatives are uncomfortable. I get a general sense that they're not comfortable having me over at family do's and stuff like that, because they are uncomfortable with the idea that how we're going to explain the fact that Georgie is not married, she doesn't have children, what is she doing, all these
well,
things.
I've become more I've become more conservative with age, and I think there's a place for more conservative people in the gay movement. And I look at people like Douglas Murray, and I think if it all becomes like the gay community is all leftists, then as times change and political winds change, we can just be left out in the cold. It's good to have people on both sides. You understand? It's very good to have people on both sides. And also when you come out to a more conservative family, then they can understand that your sexuality doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your view on economics or your patriotism or anything else they might, like if they're a military family, that might be very near and dear to them. So, it helps break some of the stereotypes for them. So I think there's a place for conservatives in the gay movement,
Yes, yes.
to
And I
me.
have a term for that. And a lot of people have a term for that. It's called intersectionality.
Yes.
Where you have the intersection of several identities for queer people, because they're not just queer. They might be queer Muslim, they might be queer, Hindutva. We have queer
Yeah,
Hindutva.
yeah, yeah, of course.
And we have to engage in dialogue with them. We have to talk to them. We cannot say, "Oh, you're horrible. I'm not talking to you because I'm leftist and I'm, so progressive." I have a problem with that kind of attitude. I think that isolates us, and we don't have a ongoing dialogue with people because it's very easy to take positions that are higher, up, and then you get isolated, and then you're like, okay, my God, we're all in our little silos, and we have five people who we agree with, and we all pat each other on the back and sit in a room, and that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, you have to have true diversity. You have to have true diversity that allows for some diversity of opinion as well. And one of my issues with, I mean, it's very personal, I guess, and maybe I just don't understand it. But one of my personal issues with the whole non-binary thing is because part of our logic that we sold people into accepting homosexuality in the US was that it was a fixed trait. It was a hardware issue. It was something we were born with, whatever. And so you should not be judged for something you cannot help. And that was certainly that was that was certainly a selling point to my parents to get them to accept me. Okay. But then when you get the non-binary people coming and talking about being gender fluid and I feel male today and female tomorrow, it kind of throws that all into flux. And I think then people start questioning, well, is this really a choice? And to me, it shouldn't matter if it's a choice or not. It's still your life. But for some people, if it becomes a choice, then they can't excuse it. You understand what I'm saying?
But my problem is that, Boswell, why do we have to have an excuse to be gay? Do you have to look for excuse to be heterosexual?
Well, right. I mean, that was what I would always say about religion when they would play that, oh, it's a choice. It's like, well, religion is a choice, and we still are asked to respect people of different religions.
Yeah. So
So,
I mean, what is this thing about? Even whether it's choice, whether you're born that way, whether you get up in the morning feeling gay and go to sleep feeling straight, why does it matter to people? I don't understand why you have to justify your existence. The moment you start having to justify that, it becomes a problematic kind of a dialogue. It becomes a problematic way of looking at things, because then you're saying actually you don't have a right to exist, but we're giving you an excuse. Oh, you were born that way. Oh, you were born blind. You know, do
right,
we,
right,
do
right.
we say things about blind people? I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do.
Yeah,
Because we're
yeah,
very
yeah.
ableist in our way of approaching life. We say, oh, bichari, uska ek hi tang hai, yaar. What does that mean? She has
I,
one leg. So,
I agree with you on a theoretical level. I agree with you, but I guess on a practical level, knowing the way people react, I think that it's just easier to sell the notion if people think it is a born immutable trait. It's easier for a lot of people to accept that. Now, maybe that's something we
I
got
don't
to
know.
go beyond. I don't know.
I don't
Huh?
like I don't like to be easy for people. So, well, I'm willing to take that risk.
Okay. So anyway, I wanted to get back to the art scene a little bit.
Yes.
And oh God, I forgot what I was going to ask you about the art scene.
You should write things down.
I should write things down. I mean, I used to always write notes and then I would find I never looked at the notes. So then I stopped writing notes. And now that I don't write notes, now I forget all the time. Um,
Can I
oh,
make a point here?
sure.
And since you're looking at your notes and getting to your question, I want to tell you that there was another artist who I met uh, called Tejel Shah, who was a
Yeah, yeah.
photographer, and she really changed because I was a lot like you said, I was born that way, and I was very conservative about the bisexual movement. I was uncomfortable about a lot of things, but hanging out with Tejal and then joining this group called Levia, which was earlier called Sri Sangam, really opened up the theoretical and the lived experiences, and a whole world of existence just opened up to me. And I think that her work, although she doesn't show it that much in India anymore, but when she was showing with Mirchandani and Steinrucker, and she was showing in Bombay, it was wonderful to have Tejal around, showing her work and being this radical queer feminist. And
What happened to Tejal Shah? I haven't heard of her for a long time. She was very much on the scene for a while.
well, that you'll have to ask her because I've also not been able to contact her or be in touch with her. My guess is that she kind of became very introverted because it was difficult for her to deal with the kind of art scene that was, on one hand accepting but not really, and then, oh, we'll show this work, but we don't want to show that work. And, the Hijra community also worked with her, but then she came under attack for using quote unquote their issues, and
Okay.
then, so there was a lot of
She
uh,
got accused of appropriation, basically.
appropriation, yeah. So that happened to Tejal. That happened to Tejal, and I don't know whether she addressed it or whether it became okay or what, because I have not touched base with her for years. I mean, I last met her in Delhi when she was visiting, and I was staying with a friend called Leslie Estevas, who's a writer and also queer person, and we were living in a sorority setup with my partner, and Tejal came over at that time, and we hung out together. It was really nice to talk about the scene. But after that, I have not met Tejal because
You
I
know, there I'm noticing a little like rumbling in my headphones. Is there like an
okay,
AC on or anything?
yeah, there's
Or a
an.
fa-
Are you gonna make them turn off the AC and roast me?
Are you really hot?
It's very hot over here, Gozo.
Oh, okay. Well, then leave it on. I'll try to take it out in post editing and see what I can do.
Sorry.
Okay. It seemed like as soon as I said that, it went away a little bit. So Tejal Shah, we don't know what happened to her. But
Well,
she's still in India. She's in Goa. The last I
I
heard, she
don't-
moved to
she's
Goa.
in Goa. She's in Goa, but she's gone really quiet, and I don't know why that has happened. I don't
Yeah.
know whether she identifies as she or they, or I don't know anything. So, I mean, I'm only talking about Tejal Shah that I knew in 2010, and after that, there's been like 10 years of silence between us.
And then, of course, there was Jahangir Johnny was pretty out there too,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
yeah.
He was quite out.
He is also somebody I've been in. I showed him in one of my exhibitions that I did called Red Moon Songs at the APJ Gallery. I don't know if you know about that show, but that was one of my biggest shows because it had like 35 artists. And I showed people like Sonia Korana, and I had a little clip from Nalini as well, which I had to unfortunately take down because she was not happy with the display, the way they displayed it. But there were lots of people who were feminist, who were queer, who, because I was looking at the idea of menstruation and how the time when women enter that phase has been stigmatized by society, but actually women are most powerful at that time according to the beliefs that exist within tribal communities, within communities that are not sort of quote unquote urban, to use that word. And the way that people have, because also we know that they were not allowed into the Ayappa temple, and Ranjit Hoskote has also talked about this in his exhibition with Smriti Dixit. So it's something that records this idea of women being untouchable, being whatever, approachable at that time. And I wonder often whether it stems from patriarchy, because oh, you can't make love to her at that time. So
You're
is
right,
that why
right.
is that why you are so upset with her? That's the question I've asked men, you know. And she's okay when she's not bleeding, but otherwise, oh, I can't touch her, I can't be near her. So
Yeah, I always find
I
that unbelievable. I mean, in Rajasthan, there's a lot of temples that have signs out front about, no menstruating women.
yeah. So that show challenged that idea, and I had people like Gogi Sarojpal who did some really strong work, and Shivani Agarwal, and there were lots of artists who addressed this issue, and then there was Jangir Jani, who talked about the idea of, and he showed this beautiful film of Zina Taman, where she's talking about her desire and her sexuality, and you have that shot where her eye has been damaged, so
Right.
by her
But
hand.
when you think of the Indian art scene and you think of the sort of the cream of the crop, the top tier, what you would want to say, what people think of in the Indian art scene, are there really any very out and open gay people there? It
I mean,
seems like,
there's Bhupen, of course, there's Bhupen who's on the
but
top.
Bhupen's long gone. Who's replaced
And,
him?
and I think that people also feel more comfortable with dead artists, to be honest.
Yeah.
We are, I have been told by my professor that we are a group of, what should I say, corpse worshippers.
Yeah.
We love it when people die, and then we can, of course, hike up their prices.
Well, I remember reading one time that even shortly after Bhupen was dead, and there were a lot of eulogies to him, somebody wrote somewhere that one of the collectors was, or one of the dealers was saying, like, how do you sell this work to people? Because, the whoever the collector was like, well, it's very like pornographic in his mind, too sexually charged. It's like, how on earth can you sell this? Um, in just a monetary sense, not like.
Oh, but Picasso's okay. Picasso can be doing lots of things with women, and that's fine.
Right,
Yeah, so I just want to tell that collector, go look at Picasso's work and then come back and have a word with me and
right, right, of
see how
course.
pornographic that is. And let's even look at, for example, Gauguin, who we just love. Gauguin was soft porn. If you want to go there, if you want
Gauguin
to use
was definitely soft porn.
you want to
Yes,
use that
a
line,
lot of soft porn. In
yeah.
fact, it's hard to imagine a Gauguin that isn't soft.
And he was having a rollicking scene with the Tahitian women. So
Right.
let's question that. If we're going to throw questions and say, oh, how can Bhupen talk about sexuality, and how can he talk about making out, men making out in this way? Let's have a look at heterosexual paintings and see how much making out there is there. And yeah, let's then just say where does art and pornography begin? I think that's a larger question.
Right, exactly. And I always feel like, you really have to look at everybody in the context of their historical times. When people go back and, they might criticize some artists because, oh, they were gay, but they weren't out and they were in the closet. And it's like, well, of course they were. Everybody was back then, It's
Yeah,
like it wasn't 2020
exactly. I think
at the
that's right.
time that Oscar Wilde was running around,
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But yet you can. My argument to them is that their work is timeless, and if you read their work, and I mentioned this earlier also to you, that there are certain things which are within the subtext. And this is something I had a conversation with Rekha as well, and she said you can be subversive in the subtext, and we call it SS, and I love that because it's really, subversion can be not in your face. It can be in a subtext, and you can be so subversive, and you can be read across generations, and you can be seen maybe 100 years from now. and you can see, oh wow, this person was talking about that. So I think art
Right.
is timeless. Michelangelo existed at a time when nobody was talking about homosexuality.
Right.
Oh, you got an important message?
No, no, it's just a
Your
beep.
boyfriend messaging you?
Yes, it was actually. It was Tommy messaging from Bangkok, but I just turned off the beeper because we're doing an interview. He'll understand. So let's get away from the sex for a while. Other than that, what do you see are the problems right now in the art scene, in the Indian art scene? I mean, obviously COVID, and there's so many
Bhupen. Yeah.
symposiums and Zoom things that you can't count them anymore. I have seemed like I have 3 a night to join if I wish. Um, but
So,
before COVID struck, maybe, what are the problems that we need to address in the art community? Do you have any opinions on that?
yes, there is one very big thing that I am waiting to see happen is that we need a board, that can certify whether something is fake or not.
Yeah.
Because that is a real problem that the art world faces. And I've seen fake Anjali Ramanans going around, fake Suzas going around, fake Hussein's. Hussein is the easiest artist to fake because he was so prolific. And he would just, he was a man of the moment. He would just draw on a napkin and give it to somebody in a tea shop and say, this is for you, this is a gift. And then somebody would come and find it and blast it. The next thing you know, it's in an auction. So it's very hard to authenticate an artist like MF Hussain. But we need a board. We need something in place that can help with authentication, because otherwise it's really difficult to make the market grow, to make buyers confident, to make buying and selling of art legitimate, because it's really hard. Otherwise, you're paying crores of rupees and suddenly you wake up and you realize, oh my God, this is a fake.
Right, exactly.
So
I
I think,
mean, I always question when I look at Saffron art, not to single Saffron out, but they have so many of those FN Souza, pen and ink drawings on A4 paper. And it's just like, well, how many did he do? After a while, you just start wondering because they seem to be there's always like 10 in each auction, you know? And then you start wondering, well, are they all Souzas?
well,
I
you
don't
have
know.
to, that's the thing. No, I mean, we found there were so many people who pointed fingers at Sotheby's, and Bowring's had to shut down because of
Yeah.
the fake Raja Ravi when it was found and then it was discovered. And then we had poor Neville Turi, who suffered because of the quote unquote fake Bhupen Kakar that was in his auction. And Neville is somebody who I've worked with very briefly, and I've known him for a while. But he's very, what should I say, he's an authentic person, you know. His passion for the arts is very real. And he's got so much of art lying in the go down, which he can do absolutely nothing with because of this whole fake thing that happened. And then that whole.
I've had this issue with, guys, I buy these vintage miniatures,
Yeah.
and like some people say, oh, they're wonderful. And then other people say, well, Waswell, they're probably just fakes from Jaipur. But then I've had people like Veronica Seraph and Sunika Soni come in and say, Waswell, if they are fakes, they're really, really good fakes. So they're still worth the money you paid. Don't worry, they're excellent.
Yeah. That's true.
So,
I was watching this thing on the blacklist the other day, where our friend goes and he finds out that the person who's authenticating the fakes is actually the daughter of the collector,
oh.
and she's taking revenge on her dad for being a classist bastard that he is. Sorry for using language. We might have to edit it out.
Well, I remember when Raza came to town and he just took up a suite or something in Delhi and he just announced that when there was a lot of question about fake Razas. I think there was an entire show that they decided like 99% of them were all fakes. And he just set himself up in a hotel and said people could come and he would authenticate. But the rumor was, I don't know if this was true, the rumor was he was charging like a lakh of rupees to authenticate a work. I don't know if that
There are
was
lots
true.
of rumors, even to the point where the people have said that Raza was not painting in the last like the last 5 to 6 years of his career, because he was not even able to hold anything. Forget about making perfect circles. So I mean, Raza did say that I use an assistant to
Right.
help me. He did say that.
Right.
There were people who admitted to being his assistant, and I think there's nothing wrong in that, because we know that the people like Da Vinci, for example, the most expensive painting that's going around right now, this the Salvator Mundi, was the question about it is it made by Leonardo or is it made by Leonardo's assistant? And if it is, then is it okay for the sheikh who bought it to pay so much money? And it's
Right.
floating around somewhere on the ocean right now. We don't even know where that painting has gone. So the question is that, what is real and what is fake? Because art is sometimes collaborative, right?
Right.
And
Right.
you
Right.
you you would know that because you've worked with people and you've collaborated, and you know that there is. I mean, Subodh Gupta creates work which is worth crores and crores of rupees, but is Subodh making each bartan? No, he's not. Is he
No, of
sitting and
course not.
soldering each bartan? No, he's not. He's using help. He's got a whole production house. Anish Kapoor has got a whole production house. So what is
Well, we had that. I mean, we're trying to be very honest about what we do. So
as long as
for the first 10 years, it was literally with the miniatures, it was just RVJ and I. Everything was done with RVJ and I. And then after 10 years, around 2015, 16, the demand just grew so much and we couldn't keep up. It was demands. They needed suites to go in the Indian Art Fair, and other collectors wanted to buy things. I mean, we were lucky. And so I brought in Dalpat at that time to start doing some backgrounds for us. And then Rakesh was coming in and finishing the backgrounds and putting the characters in. And that happened with Chaos in the Palace. But we've been quite open about it, though, they're still sold under the name Waswo X Waswo with RVJ, because RVJ is always involved in some way. But now we have an assistant. But we always had a border painter too. Shankar always painted the borders. So to me, it has always been collaborative work by me, by Rakesh.
yeah. So there you go.
And we hope to put out a book that we hope to call Karkana, which just explains the whole thing
Oh,
someday.
right. Yeah, I
You
think that
know,
even the miniatures were collaborative. It says over there, Baskin or Misaba would make the basic drawing, and then the hashia was done by somebody else, and the coloring was done by somebody else. So you got something which was done by a studio.
right.
They were
But
working.
that's something very different than if somebody just out in the market makes a miniature and says, "Oh, this is a Wazo X Wazo and RVJ," and signs their name to it. You
Oh yeah,
know,
that is a problem.
that's a whole different thing. We have a guy in Udaipur. I hope he doesn't hear this. He's actually a police walla. He works for the police department.
Oh,
You know, and he he was making like MF Hussein paintings. They look very, very much like MF Hussein's oils on canvas. And his name happens to be M.A. Hussein. So he would sign everyone with his real name, M.A. Hussein, but he signed it in that same signature. So then it's like, well, is that a fake? It would trick a lot of people if they didn't look closely and notice that it was not an F, but it was an A. Did you understand? But he made a name for himself. But then he came out and he said that he actually had some articles in the papers. He said he was just doing it because he so admired MF Hussein, and all of his work was a tribute to him. So,
well, that's an easy way to get away with it. But
right,
I'm
right,
sure if you took tribute money, then that's a bit of a problem.
right, right,
You know what I mean? It is a very what should I say? It's a mixed bag, because there are so many sides of this argument which you can take up and say that, okay, is it the feeling of the work that I want to go for? But when you're paying in lakhs and crores of rupees, you do want an authentic work, and I think that it's okay to want that. And I think that it's because we are talking about, like you said, even though your work is collaborative, it's made by you guys. It's something that came out
right,
of your brain, right? And even if Subodh is selling a work that is, made by his studio along with his people who collaborated with him, it's his idea.
right.
So it's the idea is actually what is the ultimate thing. I mean, that's what you're selling.
We only ran into a real copy one time, and that was one of my friends, Pramod Kumar, came to visit, and he was on top of the studio roof, and he got a call from somebody who said they had a Waswo. They were just kind of screwing with me, and they sent a photo of it, and it was, but it wasn't. You know, I could tell it wasn't. It wasn't a Waswo, but it was a copy of a Waswo. And I asked, well, what is this? And Pramod said, well, this guy bought it, and it's a canvas. It's like 6 feet by 6 feet. So somebody took one of our miniatures and painted it on a canvas hanging on somebody's wall. And it was like, I mean, what can you do? It's like, okay, but it's not a Waswo. It wouldn't have my name on it.
Yeah, and then you don't have to authenticate that work. And so that's the only way you as an artist can control that. You know, you don't.
Right.
I mean, but once the artist passes away, like Leonardo's been long dead and God knows where he is now, which daisies he's picking. But you know, there are so many fake Leonardos also that we know about, and you know, which have been discovered, and finally people are like, okay, maybe it's made by an assistant, and blah blah blah. Because the paint also sometimes you can date it, you can carbon date the paint. With the thing about ancient work is that you can actually look at the carbon dating and say that, oh, you know, this has been done in 2006. Hello. It can't be Leonardo didn't suddenly pop out of the grave and paint it. But then they say, okay, it was restored. And you have to have all these things. And auctions have to do due diligence. Buyers have to do due diligence. And we need a board. It's as simple as that. You can't have everything.
Yeah, but then you only hope and pray that the board remains uncorrupted. You know.
And what is uncorrupted was,
right.
At the end of the day.
If it's a government board or a government board monitored by the galleries or whatever, but you know, it's sort of that who polices the police kind of thing sometimes.
Well, it has to be collaborative. At least in my mind, when I think about it, the ideal thing would be a private-public collaboration between, you know, the government, definitely, the private players who are important, and, you know, somebody who is part, who can authenticate the family member or the artist or, you know, all of that. And you have a procedure that you go through, which at least becomes a little tiresome for people who want to make a quick buck.
Another thing that has to change, we're going long, but I just want to say this, customs. You know, I meet so many artists who send their works to exhibitions in other countries, and this has happened to me too. And then when they come back, they get stuck in customs for months, sometimes months and months, and then they end up paying a duty to get their own works back into the country. I mean, that's horrible because artists don't make a lot of money normally. You know, when they have to, and then the custom agents, they imagine that these paintings coming back must be worth all kinds of crores and crores of rupees, you know, which generally they're coming back unsold from some exhibition. And then to make some artists pay a duty on top of that, that's really...
Or the gallery, for that matter.
Or the gallery, yes, exactly.
Not all galleries are loaded. And there are lots of galleries who stick out their neck and they want to show work which is subversive and SS, as Rekha puts it, you know. So, I mean, what do you do? And I did actually go and meet a customs guy in Mumbai. Once I did a story on this, where there was a raza. It was a large work which was stuck at the customs. And, you know, the person who had approached me said that, Georgina, will you do a story on this, how my raza is stuck at the customs? So I was working for the Indian Express at that time, and being a writer of art and culture and having a press card, I said, well, dear Mr. Customs, I'd like to meet you, you know, and would you entertain my questions? And he said, yes, come to my office. And then he was very honest, and he said that, like, you know, the thing is that we need to know, you know, who are the parties involved here. And this work has just come to us rolled up like that. And, you know, sometimes people don't even open the work. They just sell it like from one buyer to the next buyer. And so customs is really confused. So they also have their side of the story, which that's why there is that, you know, what should I say, a pile up of issues.
Right.
There's a pile up of issues. It's not that customs is against us as an art world, but they want a certain procedure in place, which not everybody follows, unfortunately. Like some people just exchange artworks like and they don't even declare that it's an artwork. They say that I'm getting a package.
Yeah. I have a piece stuck in customs right now. I've been fighting for over a month. It's not one of my own pieces. It's a little beautiful little etching that I bought from a gallery in Perugia. I bought it online, and the gallery is put the wrong name on it. She wrote Waswo X Waswo instead of my real name. So then, of course, it doesn't match what's on my ID. And it's been stuck forever. And finally, the Know Your Customer forms were approved. But now it seems like they've lost it because suddenly they've gone out of communication. It seems like they can't find it now. So it's like, oh.
That's really tough.
Right, I know.
In China, I know that they've made it free of customs, and that's why they're able to sell so much work. This is
Right.
something I discovered, when I was doing my background check on how the China market has grown so much in the Asian segment. When you look at any Christie's or Sotheby's or any catalog, you see that the Chinese market is leading in Asia. Like China likes to, there's the big dragon, it likes to lead for everything. So the Chinese dropped customs altogether. They said, yeah, you keep going back and forth with
Yeah,
us.
yeah, 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 yeah.
We don't mind. We
Yeah.
don't. We want our country to move ahead.
I think it was Singapore or Hong Kong. One of those two totally didn't have any customs for art. It was just didn't apply, which really helps things a lot.
Anyway, you seem like you want to go.
And the other thing I wonder about for the older works, which now the whole idea that you cannot ship abroad heritage works or works over 100 years old, because now you're getting like modernists and people are growing to be like 100 years old, and then like they never get to go to the big auctions, overseas, and that sort of holds back the auction market, I think, to some extent.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That is also a problem. Then you have the non-exportable heritage works, which are belonging to the country. Which there are certain works by Jamini Roy, Amrita Shergill, which cannot be exported,
right,
which
right.
are part of the Indian, what should I say, heritage.
I had a couple of those in my print collection, and when I donated it, I had to hold it back, here, because I could not send it to the U.S. In fact, they actually sent the work back to me for that reason. And it was, Mukul Day is not on the heritage list, but I had a Mukul Day, a beautiful one that was dated 1916, and I donated the work in 2017, and so it was just 100 years old. And they said if you had sent us to us 1 year prior, we could have kept it, but now that it's 100 years old, we have to send it back to you. So they were being very honest, They were like, no, we have to send this back to you. We can't accept it. So like that. So now I have it still, but I'm happy.
I'm glad you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've probably gone on between what we talked about yesterday and this. I think I have at least an hour. Probably more than an hour. So should we finish it?
We can roll up. Yeah, sure. Is there any
Okay,
last?
Georgina. Love you. Thank you for doing this. A lot of people will be happy to see you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much for giving me this platform, Roswell. I'm happy to be on your show, and I'm glad that I got a chance to share my views with you and
We
whoever watches this.
we never told about, we said that we were introduced by Rajan Fulari. We never talked about how we met in Cafe Mondegar too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that was so nice. That's a good memory for me.
yeah, that's a great memory for me as well. Yes.
We were sitting in the back of Cafe Mondegar, and I had taken Ganpat and Jay Prakash to Mumbai for their first time ever. And they had never been in a place like Cafe Mondegar before, because we don't have those places in Udaipur, at least we didn't at the time. And they were like so impressed that you came out of the back and said hello. And they said, oh, Chacha, Chacha, you just know people everywhere. And then I told them you were a lesbian, and then they were like, oh, a lesbian, It's like, well, I guess they never met a real live lesbian before. So it was a memorable occasion.
Yeah, but I prefer the word queer, Roswell.
Queer? Okay.
Yeah, I prefer queer. I think it is like problematic. But I mean, earlier I would have been okay with that label, but now I
Now
like
you like queer.
genderqueer. Yes, I like genderqueer.
You like genderqueer. Okay.
Yes, I like that.
I guess I'm old fashioned. I still like
Just queer.
gay. I
Right.
like gay, and I kind of use it across the board with lesbians
Actually,
and
I
gay
love gay.
men.
In fact, sometimes when I come out to people, I say I'm gay, and that's like because the word lesbian is so loaded. Because I just feel it's been used as an abuse most of my life, like my earlier life. Oh, she's a L, she's a lesa, she's a this. So it just kind of it has it's very and it's also very white.
Right, right, right.
So there's a problem with that word. I've had issues with it, and I felt
Well,
uncomfortable.
language means a lot. I mean, here we are still talking, but when, we first argued that we wanted to be called gay, it was supposed to be an adjective. Gay men, gay women. Gay was an adjective. It was meant to humanize, but very quickly, as it was as it was adopted by the popular culture, they started to using, oh, he's a gay, she's a gay,
Yeah,
the gays. It became a noun,
yeah, yeah,
which once again became dehumanizing,
yeah.
and that was rather sad the way that goes. And when I was in my rebellious, when I was like 19, 20 years old, I used to call myself a faggot because I did, because it shocked people, you know. It just, and I liked the fact that it shocked people, and I was kind of just out there, and it was just like, if I could shock people, then it was like, oh, it showed that I was unafraid. It's sort of like I used the word before they could. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yes, what you call reclaiming it for yourself.
Right. Some people would say like, "Are you gay?" And I'd say, "No, I'm a faggot." We'll end it there before I get myself in trouble.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay. Bye, Georgina. Love you.
take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care. Very nice talking. Stay online so we can keep talking. Bye.
Bye.